This video is an excerpt from a webinar that we ran on driving diversity. The panelist, Kwaku Nortey, is the founder of a luxury travel business called Prime Planit. Before becoming an entrepreneur, Kwaku worked in finance, first for JP Morgan and then in private equity and venture capital. Following the Black Lives Matter protests around the world, Kwaku wrote an article that went viral called Growing Up Black in London, where he spoke about racism both in the city and in the corporate world. Kwaku joined us for a Q&A where he invited webinar attendees to ask any questions that they had on how to better engage with their Black employees. I really hope you enjoy it.
Thank you. That was a very nice introduction. So hi, I'm Kwaku. I've got 10 years experience in finance. Initially started off at university, did an engineering degree and master's, ended up in China working for a telecoms firm over there. Came back to London, worked for JP Morgan, 7 years. Went to business school, graduated from my MBA, and what have I done? Worked in private equity and venture capital, and now co-founder of Prime Planit, which is a travel startup.
Oh, fantastic. Well, first of all, thanks, Colleen, as well. Really, really interesting. And we've got some really interesting questions about the Amos bursary, which we'll come to at the end of the Q&A. But thank you so much. And I can definitely speak, having gone to your awards, how impressive the young men on the bursary are. And thanks, Kwaku, as well for joining. Can you just tell us a little bit how you're involved with the Amos bursary?
Absolutely. I think my first encounter to the corporate world was in 2009, which is when the Amos bursary started. And I've put a link in the chat about growing up Black in London. One of the big things I experienced growing up in London is that there's a lot of difficulties and there's a lot of no's that you encounter. So one of the things that I thought, I had to give back, and I've also known Colleen. I think Colleen's probably known me since I was in nappies, perhaps, I thought I have to give back. I have to actually show the route in which, young people can get into the corporate world, and also break a lot of myths that, existed. So that's one thing that, was one of our passions as a whole and a collective, going into banking to give back.
Sorry, what sort of myths do you work with? Do you work to dispel?
I've seen someone put in a chat here, for instance, which is a good question. We're teaching them that hold on, where's it gone? In terms of teaching kids how to play rugby, go skiing and playing golf, to fit into the big corporate world. I actually agree with Yasmin in that chat, and I think that's one thing that if the kids have a passion in playing golf, Amos bursary gives an opportunity to do that, which is brilliant. And it also doubles up by being easy to fit into the corporate world in terms of having conversations with people. So that's brilliant. But at the same time, one of the big things I want to push to a lot of people in this chat is accept people for being themselves. Be unapologetically yourself. And I think organizations need to adjust in terms of how they, view people in general, I think.
Absolutely, and I think if anyone hasn't read Kwaku's article on growing up Black in London, it's fantastic, really, really eye-opening. And I think one of the things it really addresses and touches on is what it's like being Black in London, of course, but I guess most relevant for us, what it's like being a Black employee in the corporate world in London. And Kwaku, I was wondering if you could share some thoughts in this environment on that.
Yeah, that's a very open-ended question. I think it's very challenging. It's very challenging being Black. I think one of the biggest issues that we face is that there is no real representation. There is no one that looks like me in all the organizations I've worked in. Whether it's junior, whether it's senior, it's a lack of representation. And I think that, goes into the whole hiring process that firms use. For example, given the experience that I even have, I've sent over 300 applications and I've received no feedback. It just goes into this black hole. So I think the question is about how do we get talent coming into the organization? And also, if that talent does get into the organization, how do you retain that talent? Those are the big agendas I think that is worth addressing.
Absolutely. And I think there are two really interesting points there. I think one of the things that we often hear, and I think Colleen touched on it before, is that a lot of companies say to us, oh, well, we really want to hire more diverse talent from whatever, whatever background that happens to be. But, we just can't find the right people. And we can't find the right people from the right backgrounds. What are they doing wrong?
I think that's a lazy answer, to not sound too blunt. I think talent exists in all forms, and talent hasn't got a racial limit to, a racial barrier to talent. There's no racial barrier to talent. My thing is, it's the screening. Where are you currently hiring from is the question. So take banking as an example. Most people hire from 5 to 6 universities, Russell Group universities, most, or not Russell Group, Red Brick. And one of the problems I find with that is that's very old and archaic, because it made sense in the 20th century when the UK was very homogenous. So you would expect the talent to be concentrated in like 6 universities. That's no longer the case. I, for one, have never had a passion or a desire to go to Oxford because I simply wouldn't fit in. So I think organizations need to expand the net of universities that they hire from. I think universities need to do a better job of getting more talent coming through. And again, I'm thinking off the top of my head, I think organizations need to be better at spotting what talent is. There is no real template of what talent should be. So I think just expanding the net would be a good starting point.
Absolutely, and I think just to add to that, obviously not just looking at universities, but apprenticeship programs as well can be really positive as well. Yeah. I'm afraid we've only got time for one more question. We've already gone over, but it's too interesting to cut you off quite yet.
That's right.
But I think the other thing I really wanted to address with you is I think when we were chatting in advance of this, you mentioned that a lot of people had asked you about them seeing a lot more attrition with their with Black employees, and I wanted to ask you whether you had any advice for companies, maybe they're majority white and trying to change that, but regardless of where they start, what can they do to give more support to their Black employees?
I think it starts with getting some data. We need to get some, the ethnicity pay gap, or the report. I still haven't seen that the numbers from there, and it boils down to for me anyway, in banking, I think one of the main reasons why a lot of Black people tend to leave is because you realize you're managing people who are earning more money than you. And then it's just like, whoa, what on earth is going on? So most people in the corporate world tend to leave to start their own ventures because they can really grow culture from scratch and actually, impact or create wealth for their particular company and themselves. So I think pay is a big reason why attrition is an issue. Also, I think just generally it's uncomfortable being Black in the corporate environment. Colleagues, I think culture is set from the top, but it's implemented from mid-management, and there is no representation, so that culture doesn't filter down. So irrespective of CEOs and the C-suite setting the tone from the top, they need to put operatives in place to ensure that this is the culture is being passed down to the employees that exist. So that for me is the first thing that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. I think to your point around where people are finding talent, one of the things that we often encourage our clients who operate in a whole industry that's not very diverse or inclusive, then we will often look at sort of things that Rob mentioned before, which is where are the requirements? Are they absolutely needed? For example, we look at some transferable skills from other industries so that they can bring in mid-managers instead of waiting for 15 years whilst the grad class comes up as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think we need to be very clear that no company needs to compromise on talent. The talent exists, right? Use your existing networks within your organizations to, as in, come to me, ask me, do I know 10 people? Do referral programs using a good Black people that are, ethnic minorities that exist in your firms to expand your net. And I think as long as there's an intent from HR and just general management to be to improve diversity, it can happen, because this is not rocket science. I'm not an HR professional, but everyone has an opinion on this matter, and frankly, it needs to just be fixed.
Amen. Well, thank you very much. That's all we got time.